Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Aubrey Whitley on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from North Carolina, where I'm not even going to ask what the weather's like, everyone, because I know that that's normally my icebreaker, and I'm just not going to do it today because I just don't feel like it. And I know a lot of people are going to rejoice in that. But yeah, she's a bodybuilder on here to share her health and fitness journey and discuss all things health and fitness. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Aubrey, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I appreciate that. Well, and since I said that I'm not going to ask you about the weather, we're just going to dive right into it. To get things started, why don't you just give us your backstory on what got you started in the gym and how that evolved to you becoming a bodybuilder?
So it's so funny because I was actually thinking about that before we started, and I'm like, how deep should I go? So I'll give
Take as
the
much time as you want. It makes my job easier.
okay. Well, I have a little bit of a past, so I have a little bit of a rough history, and I took years to sort of get myself together, so to speak. There were some drugs involved, there was arrests involved. You can use your imagination. It was not a pretty sight. And to make it worse, I was a mom at the time. And so that really, the fact that I couldn't get my life together for my son was really hard to come to grips with. And so, I finally reached out and I got some outside help. And with that, I knew I needed to do more than just talk. Like, I knew that I had to put some actual things into place in my life to be better, to not keep making the same mistakes I was making. And so, in addition to getting the help that I needed, I found the gym. And that was like probably more helpful for me than sitting in talk therapy. So, I could go in there, I could work it out. And it's like at that time, my body was just holding on to so much trauma and just so much just toxic, toxins, I guess. So the gym released that. And I would say, like, from day one, I could feel that happening. And I was pretty hooked from day one. And I knew that, it was pretty much considered an addiction for me, but I was okay with it because compared to the addictions I had, I was like, I'll take this. This is fine for me. So, and from the time I started, I really felt just like a special energy around it. Like I felt like I was going to do something really cool with bodybuilding or, something having to do with the gym. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I just knew I was supposed to be there. And so, like, fast forward a couple years later, I was starting to get approached by people asking if I did figure. And I was like, what the heck is this figure that people keep talking about? Like, and so I finally asked, I was like, what is a figure? And they're like, oh, that's competitions. It's bodybuilding competitions. So of course I go Google it. And as I'm looking at the women, I'm like, oh yeah, like I look like this. So I really like that it happened that way because I talk to some people and they see competitions and they think, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to go hard in the gym and do all this stuff to, improve my body so I can step on stage. And to me, that's such an extra stress. Like if you don't already love it and you're chasing the stage, to me, that's a very stressful way of going about it. So I did it the opposite where, I loved it. I fell in love with bodybuilding and shaping my body and just pushing myself to the limit to see what I could do. And then the fact that there was a stage where I could compete made it, even more of a thrill. So that's when I began to step on stage. And then when I got my pro card, people started asking me for help. Like, how do you get, that physique? How did you get to this point? And for probably about a year, I was coaching people without charging. And I was spending all my time with people, like helping them with their physique and, just not even just their physique, but also just changing their mindset about their life and just how powerful they can be. And I realized, like, this is my calling. And at the time, I had just graduated with my master's in counseling. And I'm kind of glad I did that. It was a long road. And it took me a while to realize that it's okay for me not to be a mental health counselor. But I'm so glad that I put that to the side and decided to coach because every single day I'm so excited about what I do. And I probably work 3 times as much as I ever have, and it doesn't feel like it. So that to me is just the best position to be in. So that's like the shortened version, I guess. Of course, you can imagine like all the little details I could go into on each each area, but that's the gist of it.
Well, lucky for you that you have one of those jobs that you can actually like work all that and not to feel like you're working, because sign me up for one of those. Eventually I might find it. But yeah, that is everyone always tells me like, oh yeah, find a job that you enjoy so much you can't do. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that those were just falling out of the sky, but I gotta go looking then. So but that is great. I am happy for you, and like I understand that working for free thing. I mean, I was making $5 a month on this podcast for like the first 3 years that I was doing this. So literally, it's crazy when you do it at first, but then when things finally start to go, it really does make things so much easier. But did you have any misconceptions about the sport of bodybuilding? Excuse me, when you were first getting started, because so many people in the general public are so unaware of the sport of bodybuilding that like there are just so many myths that people believe.
Yeah, I don't even know if I was introduced to it until I got into bodybuilding because I I really fell into it, and I wasn't around a bodybuilding community before I fell into it. Um, and in my family growing up, we always loved athletics. We always loved sports, and so I guess I kind of came from a more like liberal view of it. It wasn't, we weren't super conservative in my family, so that helped a lot. But then once I really got into it, I guess maybe when I started looking like a bodybuilder, that's when I really noticed like, oh, okay, these people can get a bad rep. And especially with social media, you hear all the opinions in the world plus more. So that's really where I was like, holy cow, people have no idea the reality. And there's a whole lot of talk about things that they don't really know a lot about. So I think you're right. Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned family. What were your friends and family's reaction like when you announced them, like, "Hey, I want to give bodybuilding a try," and how has that evolved as you've gotten more into the sport?
I think I was lucky because coming from where I was, which was just a hot mess, to bodybuilding, I think they were kind of relieved. I think they were like, okay, like she's found something that's not going to kill her, that she's going to put all of her energy into. So they were surprisingly supportive all around. A lot of them came and asked for help, which is just really cool when you have somebody that was helping you for so many years, then to turn around and ask you to kind of give back. That was very rewarding. I think the people that have given me, it's been surprising the people that have given me a little backlash. It's not people who I would expect. It's usually people who, like, at one point were pretty supportive, but maybe are just kind of stuck in their ways and don't see or don't know the information, the up to date information about fitness and just how strong women are actually able to get. I think it's like you were saying in the beginning, like there's this misconception that women shouldn't lift heavy weights or shouldn't lift weights at all, or they're going to look like a man. And it's so not true. Like, it's first of all, we have the ability to be as strong as men. And second of all, yes, it takes a lot more hard work than just going and looking at a dumbbell to get to that point. So I love that you brought that up.
I honestly think it was just a guy with a really good PR campaign that came up with that myth, and it just spread like wildfire. It's just one of those things that happens. But I mean, getting into it, I mean, I also love to talk genetics on this podcast because I hear this all the time and it just drives me crazy. Oh my God, I want her abs. I want his arms. I want their back. And everyone, I'm just going to say this because I say this all the time. You can train just like someone. You can eat just like them. You can take their supplements that they take. You are not going to end up looking like them. It's just not the case. I could do the same thing as Jay Cutler does, and I'm unfortunately not going to end up looking like him. But on top of that, everyone always has that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then everybody always has that one body part that just drags behind it. They have to train to oblivion. What was one body part that really took off for you, and what was one body part that you just had to drag behind?
Ooh, I like that question. Shoulders for me, that those are pretty easy to develop. And of course, I've gotten to a point where they've plateaued, so it doesn't really still apply. But especially for the majority of it, shoulders and back tended to be pretty easy. Arms too, so upper body, I guess. Legs is like always been my area that I've got to focus so hard on. I'm naturally lean, so I do have a little envy towards the shorter girls that can really pack on that size on their bottom half. But of course, when I talk to them, they're like, "No, I want to be like you." So it's funny how we always want the opposite of what we have.
I will say though, this is a short. I mean, yeah. See, that's my tongue twisted moment. This is a sport for shorter people. Like, let's be completely honest. Like, I went to my first bodybuilding show 2 months ago, and being 6'3", I was the tallest person there by a good like 4 or 5 inches, even in the crowd. Really, I think there was one guy that was like my height, and that's just, yeah. It is. It is when you realize that it is a big eye opener too as well. But just with everything in this sport too, this is so much more of a mental sport than it is a physical sport, and people do not understand that. They'll just see the results that you get and they'll say like, "Oh my God, Aubrey, you look amazing." They don't understand the mental transformation that has taken place as well. What has this journey been like for you mentally?
Ooh, it's really been everything for me mentally because to me, it's your physique is sort of an expression of your transformation on the inside. Like, I think that has to really come first, or at least simultaneously, like as the physique begins to develop. So I would say, like, it's like I was saying in the beginning, bodybuilding has been probably as helpful to me as therapy or anything else as far as like self help. But the amount of growth that it's allowed me to like have, I guess, sorry, this is like a touchy subject to me because it's such a prominent theme in my life is that like as my body's developed, so has my in myself and my confidence in myself. And so I think they're so parallel. And I think it's really obvious when you come across somebody and they're not parallel. Because does that make sense? It's sort of like um, you can see a person who doesn't have that self-belief yet, but maybe they've gotten the physique and it's almost like it's grown ahead of them and they're not quite there yet. Their self-esteem isn't there yet. And you look at them and you're like, dude, do you know what you look like? And so
That's
it's
95% of the guests that I've had on this show.
oh wow. Yeah, it's
No, no,
funny.
well, that's also with like the body dysmorphia as well, though, where they're like, "Do you think I look great?" And it's like, "Look in a damn mirror, you idiot." But I laugh at that, but it's like, no, I know what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's such a mental game. And I didn't even think about that part of it, like our view of our physique itself, not just like who we are as a person, but yeah, when it comes to competitions, that can really screw your head up a little bit. I remember after my first two shows, it took me a while to feel normal again. Like I just viewed myself as big, like as fat. I hate to say it, but I knew rationally I wasn't, but I try to prep people for that when they go into shows because I'm like, don't listen to anything you tell yourself for the first 6 months after the show. Just don't worry about it because then you look at pictures and you're like, oh, I was really lean. Once your hormones and everything balance back out. So it's such a mind game.
Yeah, I mean, the mind game is just, yeah, don't even get me started on that. Your mind is your biggest positive and negative in this sport. I mean,
Yeah,
we could go 3 hours in depth on that just alone ourselves. It's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's everything. Like mindset, it all starts with mindset, I believe. Really do.
Oh, I mean, just to even compete in a sport and go through the prep, I mean, you have to have the right mindset because so many people try and very few of them are actually able to pull through. Like I told you my story. And again, that's the whole nutrition side of things that are just, that's just a whole, different thing.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people it's almost like what was I going to say? It was about my when my camera cut out, I like lost track.
No
Um
worries.
talking about mindset, show prep. I forget. It'll come back to me if it's
It'll
important.
come back. And if it does, yeah, just let me know. Yeah, no worries. No worries at all. But I mean, nutrition is also such a big thing in this sport. I mean, it's not talked about as much as it should be. What were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made and have continued to make? Because, like everything in this sport, it's always ever evolving.
Yeah. So it actually goes with I just remembered what I was going to say and it goes with it. A lot of times like we have to pretend that we want to do things and then it's almost like the motivation catches up. So that's a practice I used a lot with nutrition was I would go through the motions like I didn't want to eat chicken and rice and chicken and greens, I wanted to go eat pizza and burgers. And I love sharing that with people because I think a lot of even professional bodybuilders have a hard time admitting that like food is a struggle. And I think people need to hear that like they're not alone. Like just because they're at the beginning of the process doesn't mean that people that are this far along aren't struggling still as well. So I still have to keep that in check because I love food. I love pizza. I love burgers. I love it all. So um, I sometimes I have to pretend I don't. That's, I mean, and it's easier sometimes than others. And I've found that stress is the main culprit of falling off of a diet. So if you can keep your stress low, then your self control really comes up. Like you really have a lot more self control.
Well, you walked right into it. I mean, stress, yeah, it is so much more impactful than a lot of people realize when it comes to just your overall health. What are some ways that you try to keep stress low? Because no matter what, like people have said that like they try to avoid all stressors. It's never going to happen. You're always going to have some level of stress in your life. And if it isn't, then I want to know what drugs you're on psychedelically, because then I want some of them as well, because you have found that spiritual place. But like, how do you deal with stress? Because you're never going to be able to get fully away from stressfulness.
You are so right. And I think it's about the narrative I tell myself about stress. So, like, if I'm stressed, which I am most days, and I'm like, wow, stress is hard, stress sucks, then I'm having like such an adverse reaction to stress, which is not avoidable. And so, but if I rewire that narrative and I'm like, oh, stress means I'm productive, stress means like I've got some good positive things coming my way. And I read that in a book. And ever since I read that, it has changed my whole outlook on it. I think it was actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of Menno Henselman's um, control, take control of your mind. That might not be the exact title, but it was definitely from Menno Henselman's. And his whole view on stress really changed my life because I realized that like a lot of times it's our narrative we tell ourselves, not just the stress itself.
And I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been stressed out about something, and then as soon as I get started doing it, and it takes me about 5 minutes to do, and I'm just like, okay, that was all for nothing. Then stuff like that. Like there've been even times where like I had a podcast, I'm stressed out, and then as soon as I get started talking, it's like I don't even know what I was stressed out for. So that's I wish hindsight would be involved in stress because I think everyone's lives would be just a little bit easier on that part as
Yeah,
well. But
I think you're right. It does melt away. Like even when before I came on here, because I get natural nerves but I had a client up until about 10 minutes and I came on and I was so grateful for that because then it didn't even give me time to like build that stress up. So yeah, it's funny. Stress is a funny thing.
my first ever musician guest for my first ever podcast that I ever did, my hand was shaking as I pressed the button to call them on Skype here right now. So that just, but then after about 5 of them, like, yeah, it's just like, I've done these so much that it's like impossible for me to get stressed about the podcast. I might get stressed about like, if I have something to do like right afterwards, then I get stressed about that. But like, yeah, it's just with repetition, like with everything in life. I mean, I bet your stress as you competed in more shows gets less and less as to stepping on the stage at least. I hope it does, because if it's still the same, then it's so actually where does your stress fall now on going on? Has it gotten less stressful for you as you've done more and more shows?
Definitely. And one thing I was going to touch on is like, I think stress can be helpful in moments like that. Cause I don't know if with what you do, like if you're not stressed at all and you just kind of go on there,
Oh, there's a
do you
little.
ever
There's
find,
a. I was just gonna interrupt. There's a little stress, and then there's literally just sweating your head off, just like about to like have a heart attack. Stress. Yeah. There's when I say like stress,
yeah,
like I'm still stressed. Like yeah, like this is gonna be like. I hope the most stress I am for this is that everything goes right with like the audio and the video and everything like that, so that editing's easier. And so that's what I'm most stressed about, and obviously the conversation. But like, see, and as we say that, the computer glitches up, or her side glitches up a little. Again, no,
yeah.
no worries at all. But like that's my part. But then I'm talking about like the stress of like I couldn't even get out of my bed. That type of stress where it's like I can't even move really.
Yes, and I have had that. My national show I did, I was so nervous that I forgot my whole routine. And I tell people that because I'm like, don't stress too much about your routine because apparently it doesn't matter quite as much as comparisons because I didn't hit any of the poses. I was so nervous. I went out there and I hit like my front pose and I was staring at the judges and I just started giggling and smiling because I realized I was just totally blank. So I kind of moved my body around a little bit, did a little wave, walked right off. So it's definitely gotten better since then.
When you talk about posing, and that's one thing that I would have never guessed in a million years, is the hardest thing out of a lot of the journey. I mean, if you were to talk about posing, the nutrition, and the working out, a lot of these guests posing is the hardest thing, and I would have never guessed that. What is your relationship like with posing?
I love to pose, and that's one thing I love to help people with. I think it's because I've always loved to dance, and I've like choreography has always been fun to me. But I can see how if that's not your gig, like it's overwhelming. And I've seen a lot of people that will wait like the week before the show to start practicing their posing, and I'm like, you're gonna be so stressed. But I love it. I think it's one of those things where like the more you do it, obviously, the better you get and the more fun it is. So that's what I try to remind my clients. I'm like, just practice and practice, and one day you're going to realize it's fun. And it does, it happens, it's fun. And I also like to live vicariously through the guys because I love the classic physique poses. They're beautiful. So I love to pose a guy. So much fun.
I wish that like they have all divisions do like the guy, like the guy poses, because it's like it's bodybuilding. Those should be like every class should do like a front double or a back double or a lat spread or something like that, because like it's bodybuilding. That's what it should be. So, but out of the poses that you do, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
Ooh. Because of my body, because of my leg issue, I guess I'll say, I would say the front pose is probably my weakest, therefore my least favorite, just because you can't hide anything. I love women's physique because I would say my favorite would be like a back double bicep, just because that's more of a strength for me. But You can hide a lot in the poses and physique and really, accentuate your strengths and kind of hide your weaknesses. But on a front pose, it's like you're out there. There's no guessing how small or big your waist is. So I would say the front pose, honestly, is probably my least favorite. Not on other people, just on me.
Oh yeah, like you said, it's the most like revealing where it's like, yeah, you have to be at the top of your game, otherwise it will show. And that's what I think one of the main reasons of posing is. But like just with posing alone, just that maturity and that stamina that you need in the muscle to be able to be on stage for that amount of time and pose. How long did it take for you to develop that? Because that is one thing that differentiates just the average public who could maybe be on stage for like 30 seconds really and be in a pose state. Because let's be honest, the body is not meant to be flexed for that long a period of time. But how long did it take you before you develop that overall stamina that you really need to be a successful competitor on stage?
I think I got to that point for my first show because I'm just a perfectionist. I'm really strict on myself, and I got to where I can hold those poses for like up to 2 to 3 minutes because I wanted to get prepared in case comparisons took a while. But I will say the posing itself has come a long way since then. I look back and I'm like cringing, like, oh yeah, probably should have changed that a little bit. But that's what I always tell, like I recommend people try to get to where you can hold each pose for 2 to 3 minutes, then go to the next one, hold it for because if you can do that, then you're gold. Because you can, and I'm sure you've seen like the competitors on stage when they start shaking and sweating real bad, and the conditioning isn't quite there. So yeah, I would say I've been pretty picky about that from the beginning. So probably from my first show, I had that stamina, but the poses themselves have really improved since then.
It's just like with everything in this sport, it takes time. I mean, this is the one sport where as
Hmm.
you get older, you get better at the sport. I mean, a lot of people just don't realize that as well. That's why I have some of these like 40 and 50-year-olds on and they're in their best shape because yeah, it's just the maturity of the muscle and with, all the practice that it entails as well. And when you walk on that stage, what is that moment like for you? Because let's be honest, you went through a prep and preps are not fun. I had one guest say that their preps are always fun, and I said, I will drive you to a mental clinic then because you need some serious help on that end. But what is that moment like for you when you finally get to step up on that stage and just show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months on?
Oh, I love that question. Well, if as long as I can take my nerves out of it, which I'm better at doing at this point, it's the best feeling aside from having my son. Like, I'm not even exaggerating it. And the reason why is because my mind is always all over the place. I always am wondering, am I in the right place? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Should I be spending my time somewhere else? But when I walk on stage, I know 100% that like I'm not supposed to be anywhere else. And that is why I love doing it. Like I love to compete. So when I talk to people that don't, I'm like, well, maybe just bodybuild. Like you don't have to step on stage if there's some people that tried to compete and they hated that time on stage. But I love it. I love the adrenaline. I love the art of it and just the competitiveness of it. So it's
You're
pretty
talking about
phenomenal.
every gym bro that's ever lived, basically. That act like they've
Yeah.
competed and they never have, and then they just like. But again, yeah, I know a lot of people that too. That like, yeah, they've never stepped on stage. They have the body for it, but they just say, like, hey, they might be shy, or they just might just say like, hey, I just don't, it's just not for me. And I totally respect that as well. But yeah, it's so fascinating, just the little intricities or whatever in whatever thing. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Everyone, I'm getting more tongue tied twisted again. Everyone, I haven't even had my coffee yet, but okay. So I mean,
I was
also
looking for the word to help you, and I was like, no, I know what
introsynchronicities
he's
or
trying to
something like that,
say.
or introsynchronicities, yeah, something like that. I'll look it up and I'll have it written down below on the screen when I'm trying to say it, everyone. So that at least there's that. But when you were on that stage and they announced that you'd won your pro card, what was that moment like? Because for so many of the people that I talk to, winning their pro card is the highlight of their career. Even if they go on to achieve so many big things as a pro, it's just getting that foot in the door and becoming that little fish in the big pond again. What was that moment like for you when you realized, oh my God, I'm a pro now?
I think I was in shock at first because it didn't hit me for a while, and then like the weeks following, I noticed so many changes, just the way people treated me, the way that the opportunities that opened up, and not that all of a sudden your whole life is different or anything, but it was really cool to see that transition. But the moment it happened, it's so weird because everything big that's come in my life, I had a feeling it was going to happen. Like I kind of knew it was going to happen before it happened. So I kind of had a feeling, but I didn't want to assume. But then, yeah, when it finally happened, I don't know if there's even a feeling to describe it. It's just like the most gratifying feeling knowing that you're, like I said, in the right place doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that's what it was for me, is it was just that external validation basically that I was where I belong. And that was touching for me because I felt like I belonged there. I wanted to belong there, but then getting a pro card, it's like, not that it should take that, but it felt good having, someone say, this is where you belong. And that's what it felt like.
Oh, absolutely. That goes with almost anything in life. When you finally get that validation, you finally feel like you're part of something. That is, a highlight for so many people. And I can count on my fingers, the amount of times that I've done that with various things. And so I understand that, completely. And my favorite question, what is your go-to post-show food?
Ooh, it's changed each time. This is embarrassing for me to admit, but I'm a pretty big pizza lover. So it's probably not the best post-show food, but it's usually what I do. Pizza and a nice little protein shake on the side.
What's your go-to type of pizza? What flavors or what ingredients?
It depends on where. Usually pepperoni, just a good old like New York style pepperoni pizza would be awesome. Are you with that or no? You don't like it?
See, I'm a plain Jane. I'm as plain as they come. Just get me the cheese. I'm a guy that also for hamburgers, just ketchup. That's the only thing on it. Just the meat,
No
the bun.
cheese?
If it's the only thing they have, then yes, but not my first choice. Yeah, but so I'm the most plain Jane. People give me crap for it, but I always say, hey, I am the easiest. The chefs love me. I'm the easiest person to cook for. No,
Yeah, you're
I
like,
mean,
keep all the ingredients out.
just keep all the ingredients out. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just the plain Jane with that, like cake, vanilla, or chocolate. Just just yeah. So anytime, I've tried pepperoni. I used to love hamburgers on my pizza, but then I grew out of it when I was like probably like 15 or something like that, where I just don't like it anymore. But yeah,
I
pepperoni.
haven't had that.
Yeah,
I don't
or
think I've had it from a pizza. Is it good?
it's like the hamburger sausage kind of. So it's like the little like square balls basically. It's kind of like a meatball
Mhm.
kind of thing. It's pretty good. Well, because my aunt owns a Devani's close by, so then I ate there like every Friday as a kid basically. So that's what I would have, is the sausage or the hamburger sausage. I don't know if that's what they call it, but yeah, it was good. But then I worked at a pizzeria when I was like 17 and just my worst was the people. Yeah, get me everything on it. And then you try to fit everything on a pizza, and we had like 20 ingredients. So that was
Oh gosh. That sounds nasty at
putting it
that
in the
point.
oven. It would be that tall. Putting it in the oven,
Yeah.
like
That's like
it's
not even a pizza at that point.
yeah, it's
That's just like a
ridiculous.
trough.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. But again, one of these podcasts, I am gonna have to share all my pizza stories and make people realize, like what goes on behind the scenes. But again, this is not the time for it. I'm too hungry right now to even talk about pizza right now, so it's just gonna make things even worse for me. But let's be completely honest. You're not the average looking woman. If you were to walk out in public dressed the way you are right now, you are going to get some stares just because it's human nature when they see something that's not of the normal. It's like being a mini celebrity is the best way that I really can compare it to. Just human nature when you see something that you don't see often, it's just like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. So what has that been like for you? And has it gotten easier for you as you've gotten more and more into the sport to sort of just realize that like, hey, I am going to draw more people's attention? Or is it still one of those things that you're like, okay, this is still pretty weird?
Yeah, it ebbs and flows because sometimes, like, it depends on the type of attention too. A lot of times, like if I walk into a restaurant, especially when I'm in show shape, that's like usually when you get stares. But like if I see older people specifically looking and kind of whispering, I get in my head a little bit. I'm like, I just want to kind of, discreetly give them the middle finger. But then I'm like, no, it's a generation thing. Like they're not used to it. And I guess the other side of that though is when I don't get that now, I'm like, oh no, my body, I don't even look fit anymore. So it's the
That's when you got to go up and do like some most musculars and be like, I told you, I have something, you guys. Like, look, like,
look.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's that mental game again, for sure.
Again, we could literally just talk all mental on this podcast, and it would be
I know.
worthwhile because that is the crux of everything, and that's when you dig down deep in this sport. That's what you end up getting is the whole mental side of this. But I hate cardio more
Yeah.
than life itself. Cardio to me, I hate running. I should specify that. I go on walks all the time, and walking to me is, it's fine.
Oh,
That
good.
that damn cardio, like I just absolutely hate it. And unfortunately, when you become a bodybuilder, you sign a deal with the devil when it comes to cardio. What is your relationship with cardio like?
I don't do a lot of cardio, and I don't really encourage people to do a whole lot of cardio. Like, my rule is if I can't walk up a steep hill without breathing heavy, I should probably do more cardio, but I like to leave that in my back pocket for show prep. So it's like, if, there's some people that do an hour of cardio a day, and I'm like, "Oh, man, you're gonna have a rough show prep," because
I
then it's
talked to
like
one that did 2.5 hours a couple days ago.
in show prep or just regularly?
Show prep.
Okay, okay, that's a little better because I was gonna say, oh gosh, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
like
if it was regularly, I'm saying okay, like let's talk more about that then. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I feel really bad for those people because then it's like you got 2, 3 hours of cardio you're doing trying to get into the show. So I leave it in my back pocket. But like I said, if I'm walking up a hill and I start breathing heavy, or if I'm in the middle of a set and I'm winded before my muscles fatigue, that drives me nuts. So that's when I'm like, okay, time to bump the cardio up.
Yeah, cardio is just it's I do have to say it out there, everyone. It is so healthy for you and it is so good for you. So, like, if you do need to do it, just and obviously just start on walking first off for people. Because so many people, especially when it comes to cardio or just comes to weight training in general, they decide to go full on Rambo and they go and work out for, like 3 hours a day to start out with. And then a week later, their body just fails on them. And they wonder why they're so sore and they don't go back to the gym. And it's, you just got to take your baby steps. But sleep.
Just burn themselves out.
Yep. Sleep. We got to talk about sleep because that is the most important thing in your life. And anyone that disagrees with me on that, I always tell them pull an all-nighter and then try to do what you do normally in a day and tell me how that works out for you. You can do it, but granted, you will have to become a caffeine addict and you cannot do it for much longer. I mean, like, I not gonna lie, I got like 4 hours of sleep last night, so I'm starting to feel it right now, and I still got to go to work for 8 hours and 2 hours after I'm done talking to her. So this is gonna be an interesting night. I might have to go get some Kickstarters at the gas station before some Mountain Dew Kickstarters. I might have to get one or two of them before I go in today just to feed me through it. But what is
Yeah.
your experience with sleep like? Because I mean, especially being a bodybuilder, we're not even going to talk about when you get down to your show prep because like that's when sleep becomes almost impossible. But have you still been able to keep a good sleep schedule? Because it is easy to go off littler amounts of sleep when you're not that in shape because like your body you just don't have to worry about. But like when you start getting in shape, people don't understand that like sleep becomes so much more important.
Yeah, it really does, and it's funny because my husband's in the next room, and I'm, like, waiting for him to call me out and be like, "She doesn't get enough," because 'cause I'm like that. I can justify cutting a couple hours out, and I'm like you, I feel it. It's like the whole next day, I'm like, "Why did I not just go to bed? Why did I watch that show?" So, yeah, my rule is, like, if I get less than 6 hours, which is really nothing, I don't lift. And so that's sort of my incentive because at that point, like my body needs rest more than it needs to go break down muscle tissue. So 6 hours at least, 8 is my usual goal. But you're right. Especially in show prep, like there is such a difference in a body when it's well rested versus when it's going off of 3, 4 hours of sleep. It's like it holds water. You look exhausted, you just look kind of like crap. And then you go get a good night's sleep, and all of a sudden, it's like you sparkle, like the water's left you, you look tight again. And so, yeah, sleep is so important. And I don't think hardly anyone gets enough. I think it's really underrated.
Rarely. I mean, I meet that one dime a dozen where it's, they get that. And I've always said like one of the best feelings on the planet is when you get that proper amount of sleep and you wake up feeling like a superhero, basically, just when you're so well rested and just everything is, I mean, that happens rarely for me. That might happen once a month at best, just because of the lifestyle that I've chosen when it comes to doing this and doing all my podcasts and working a full-time job and trying to work out, which I mean, one of these days I'm going to have to, let go of something because like it is taxing on me, but hey, I'm going to power through until my body eventually gives out on me, which, who knows, could be tomorrow, could be 10 years from now when my body gives out on me. I'm like, okay, I need to drop one of these things. But just with the health and fitness industry in general, I mean, it is ever evolving and ever changing. I bet from when you first started competing to even to now, I mean, so much has changed. What have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen just in the women's side of things when it comes to health and wellness since when you first started to now?
So the thing that jumps out to me is actually the divisions and competitions, how those have evolved. Because when I first started, like I was mentioning earlier, I saw these pictures of these women competing in figure, and I thought, oh, I can do that, which now I like to do physique more. But at the time, I was like, oh, wow, like I'm right there with them. And I was looking at like Olympic women, people on the Olympia stage. But now that's a much different look. And that was just like, what, 6 years ago to now, they look like babies. Like now the women are much bigger, much just, I mean, they make a real statement up there. So that's something that's been sort of shocking to me. And actually, I haven't shared this a whole lot, but I'm thinking about going back to figure because physique, it's such a, I'm like going against the grain constantly trying to add size. And there's certain things I'm not willing to do to add that size. And so staying in figure is more manageable for me. But as far as the information, I love how it constantly evolves. That's what I think is dangerous is when a coach or an athlete doesn't stay up to date when they're like married to those old school ways because yeah, it changes so much. I love that about it because it's just new every day. And it's like as soon as we think we've learned everything, here we are. We got to be a student again. So,
It seems like every day there's 100 different ways to that are invented on how to work out, and it's like, yeah, it's hard to
mhm.
soak through them sometimes and just really sort through them and get down to the meat of it. But yeah, yeah, there it. I do appreciate that, and I'm always just fascinated to see. Like, I started this podcast almost 5 years ago, and how much has changed. 5 years from now, I don't even know what that industry is going to look like itself. But I mean, being a trainer and helping others, what is your favorite part about it, and what is your least favorite part about it?
Okay. My favorite part about it is just that, like helping others when they truly, to be more specific, when I see somebody go from doubting themselves to all of a sudden feeling so empowered, that to me is better than the physique change. Like I love that. And a specific example is a lot of women are scared to go to the gym when they first start. They're insecure. They don't, they like stick to the cardio machine because they don't know what to do. So I love when a woman goes from that to being just a boss in there and not even having to look like a boss, but like, owning her space and being confident. I love that because I think that's life changing. And my least favorite is probably when I take on a client that I shouldn't. So just somebody that doesn't want it is bad, and that's okay. But that's on me for not recognizing that early on. So that's probably my least favorite part is realizing that I have someone that's not a good fit that probably just needs to go to a Planet Fitness trainer or something.
Yeah, so many people just with all the varieties of people on this planet. I mean, you're gonna eventually, run into sorts like that, and yeah, there's nothing that you can really just do other than just just tell them like, hey, things are not really working out for us. And I mean, I've even run into that with guests myself, where if they're not flexible with their schedule and they've had to just all I could get into this whole thing, but like I've run into that sort of person as well, where I totally understand where there's a time where just like, hey, I just don't think this is gonna work out. I'm sorry, but then thank you for your time, and yeah, that is, but I mean,
I was gonna say, have you gotten better in messages as like recognizing who's a good fit and who's not?
the ones that like I've had people that ask me like 80 questions afterwards, like they keep asking questions where it's like cuz like I have so little free time that like that's why I send everyone that bland message I do from like a podcast that was like 300 podcasts ago because I have it saved, because if I were to type a new one that would take time and have to be on like my lunch break at work to do that or something like that. But like
Yeah.
there have been times where like I can tell like if someone is asking so many, there's a point where like obviously I love answering people's questions, but like if you're asking me every single like idiosyncrasy thing that I'm like, okay, this person might, and especially if there's some of those people that like some of these podcasts take me 2 to 3 weeks to edit just because of how my life is, and I sometimes just don't have time. There are some people that aren't satisfied with that, and then it's like, okay, I had you on here for free, and and I'm promoting you, and you're upset about when it's going to get released when it's like, so there's just little things like that that really just
Yeah,
like,
I see that with photographers too. Like I'll hear other bodybuilders say, he's taking forever to get my pictures back. And like you said, it's this free photo shoot that, they were doing that's going to help them. So I get that.
no, yeah, but then there's just other little things too that have. I mean, obviously, when I've talked to like when you count my other two podcasts, like 987, I think I'm at. I'm gonna be doing the 1,000th one probably either by the end of next month or the beginning of November. But yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I've learned more about human beings than I ever could have really hoped to have imagined. Not doing this just from having conversations with people as well. But I mean, let's be honest. This country has gone to crap when it comes to health and fitness. Like Minnesota is one of the healthiest states in the country. I think we're either number one or two every single year. It's like between like us or Maine. Like we have so many natural parks. A lot of people are in shape here. But I went to the state fair. Even Minnesota's suffering. So like if we're suffering, I can't imagine what the rest of the country is like. Being that we're one of the healthier ones. What advice do you have for people just to get started in their journey? Because it's getting to a point where like it's getting bad. Like I'm gonna have to start like pointing things out where it's like there's the dangerous, there's like falling down the hill. We are already falling down that hill. We just haven't hit rock bottom yet, I don't think.
yeah, I think you touched on it, like talking about how you have those parks and you have more availability to be active. I think a lot of times people view fitness as something so separate from their lives. They're like, I have to do this big project, but really, like, just incorporating that as part of your life is, I think, what's important. So I would say before someone jumps on this like very structured program to just get started, like have fun, like go to the gym for 30 minutes a day, try stuff out, explore, have fun. Because I think that's where people get overwhelmed is they're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it exactly like this. But just little things like instead of taking a taxi a mile or a taxi, taking an Uber a mile, walk.
What is this, New
Or
York?
right. Or like take the stairs. And I know those are little things, but I think that's what we take for granted in our country is we're lazy. We have everything's just easy. And so I think making it a little harder and just buying groceries, like those two things, walk more and buy groceries, like instead of eating out. And that and alone can really change your life. So I think starting small and then get detailed.
I've been saying this since day one that like restaurants and other places should make their parking lots like a couple hundred feet farther away from like where their parking lots
Yes,
are. Yeah. Just
that
even
would be
that.
perfect.
Just even that. Because but then
Or
obviously you'll get
portion sizes.
yeah. I mean, it's the funniest thing. Like I have friends that go that like study abroad in Europe and eating the same stuff that they ate here, they lost like 20 pounds over a span of like 6 months. And then they come back here and they
Wow.
gain it back in like 2 months because their portion sizes are less and they have like, yeah, it's crazy when you think about that as well. I mean, there's so many things. Again, I could start my own podcast just talking about, how some of the stuff that our country does also impacts our health as well when it comes to food and all that stuff. That's a whole, different topic. But yeah,
Yeah.
again, just walking everyone. I mean, it's not anyone can do it unless obviously like you're missing limbs or anything like that. But like still, like the vast majority of people can accommodate themselves with that. And it's like just get started on that. And it's that and honestly, like even in the workplace too, like I see a lot more workplaces now doing like the stand up options where like you're standing up most of the day, which even that alone helps out more than just sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day. So
Yeah, and I'm glad like there are pros and cons because I do feel like in certain ways our society is catching up. Okay, this is a big problem. The health issue here in America is a problem. So I can see us kind of leaning in that direction. We're starting to get a little better, but nowhere near where we could be. So I love that you brought that up because I think that's something we can always improve. And just what goes into our food, I was thinking about that too. Like there's so much information out there, but in that there's also a lot of false information. Just like recently I had this lady say, "Well, I eat Gatorade bars every day." And I'm like, "You literally might as well just be eating fast food."
might as well just
Those
deep
have
fry it.
yeah, it's like you have 2.5 of your recommended sugar for the day right there in that one bar. So, yeah.
Yeah, everyone, I went over the history of Gatorade with her before we started recording. I should have the recorder going so I could use it as one of my history facts, but no, we had to. But no, yeah, so I will do that one of these podcasts with one of these guests because I don't want to, repeat it with her. But yeah, it is the funniest thing when people think about why they aren't losing weight, and then the moment that you ask them, well, what do you eat in a day? And then within 5 seconds, you're like, well, we found the culprit here.
There it
So,
is.
yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the golden question that I love to ask on this podcast is if someone were to walk up to you and say, Aubrey, we made the decision. You can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it. What would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Mm. Ooh. I was gonna say that muscles are feminine, but that's more of a society thing. I guess with bodybuilding, okay, I know. It would be that like we're all in it together. There's not different levels. Some of us have just done it for longer, but that's what I would like to change is like this big gap between, the top pros and like the beginners. I wish that it was just more meshed. And I do see a lot of that, but I would like to see more. Or I've watched people that are scared to go talk to people that are more experienced. And I just don't feel like there should be that fear. I think that, like I said, we're all in this journey together. It's not linear, but it's just, we're at different points at different times. So I think more inclusion would be cool.
Well, and you mentioned muscles are feminine too, and we'll just get into that. So, what do you think people can do to help, spread that and make that more publicly acceptable?
I think getting started themselves. That's one thing it breaks my heart when I hear a woman say, "I really want to be strong, but my husband doesn't want me to have muscles." I'm just like, "Oh, it's like you're just held back. Like that's your true nature is to be strong and fit." And so I would love to see that just some people not caring quite as much what other people think because I think that's what it'll take. Is just don't care what people think. The only opinion that matters is yours and one person at a time, we might get rid of that stigma.
I heard the best piece of advice when I was 18 that I'm not going to be one of those people that say, "Oh my god, it changed my life," because it really didn't. But it was just a great piece of advice that like I take with me. I hate when people say it's like, "Oh my god, it changed your life." I was like, "Really? Are you that gullible that one thing that one person said really changed your entire life path?" Unless like you
Yeah.
saw the second coming and then they said something you did. And yeah, maybe I can understand that. But so what the one person said to me was though is that like the amount of time that you spend thinking about what people think about you, they don't think about you nearly as much as what you think they think about you. Like most people are so focused on themselves. Whenever people do stuff and they're worried about like what others think of them, just remember how many times do you honestly think about someone that you're not like super good friends with or not like in a relationship with, that you're just acquaintances with? How many times do you honestly think about what they're doing and what they should be doing? You rarely, if at ever, think about that. And that's what people think about with what you're doing. So when you really get down to it, I wish people would like be able to realize like how little people actually think about them when they really think about it. So yeah, there's that.
That's so true. And like going to the gym, I tell girls that all the time. I'm like, think about what you're thinking of when you're there. You're not looking around to see if other people are doing things correctly. You're thinking about yourself. That's everybody else there. So that's such a good point.
I say that the same exact thing to them where it's like people do not give a crap about you in the gym. And if they do, then there's something wrong with them where it's like they should be focusing more on themselves then. But yeah, that's a big thing, especially with women too. Yeah, where they want, they're just afraid of that. And I can totally understand that because even for me, like I compare that to like when I was a freshman in high school and my brother was a senior and he introduced me to the high school weight room. It's scary when you're that little and you're going up against these big seniors in the gym, and I can assume that it's somewhat like that for women when they see like all these big burly guys in the gym for the first time. I mean, it's intimidating, but then once you finally get that mindset of like, hey, they really could care less about me, unless you like make a scene and like break some weights and stuff like that, then that's a whole different thing. But other than
Right.
that, I mean, like they generally, they really don't care too much for that. So I mean,
Yeah, they're looking at themselves in the mirror.
well, that too. I mean, that's a chronic thing. So how being a bodybuilder, how hard is it for you to go through a mirror, look through a mirror, and not pose?
I go through phases.
Okay.
I do go through phases. And of course, when you're in your off season, you don't look like how you were in season. So it's almost like a deterrent. But yeah, but I encourage people to look in the mirrors because I feel like when you're working out, it helps your mind muscle connection. So, because a lot of girls are like, I don't want to stare at myself in the mirror, but I'm like, just do it. Don't worry about it. That's what everyone else does. But I see what you're saying and just passing, like walking by a mirror, that's a little,
If I was on prep, I would pose every single time I even like if I saw my reflection in my camera or in my phone, basically it's that little, I'd be like, oh yeah, look at that. So yeah, it's it's
yeah.
it's gotta be hard. But you mentioned mind and muscle connection, and I'm gonna pretend that I've never heard that before because I have heard it, a lot on this podcast. And we're gonna pretend that like everybody that's listening to this has never heard of it, because I can guarantee there'll be one or two people that are like, mind and muscle connection, what's that? Could you explain to us what mind and muscle connection is?
Yeah. So I guess on a really basic level, being able to connect with your mind to the muscle you're trying to target. So, say you're doing bicep curls, you don't want to be feeling that, in your back and your triceps. You don't want to be swinging it all over the place and not even feeling it in the muscle you're supposed to be working. So, the mind muscle connection would just be able to connect to that muscle. And the cool thing, and my husband and I say this all the time, the coolest thing in bodybuilding is being able to take a really light weight and make it feel super heavy. That's my favorite thing. So, love my muscle connection. I think it's like supernatural.
Half of the crap talking I ever did in college was when we have friends doing burnout sets, and then when they get down to that like final 5 pound like curl, they start off at like 50 and then they go all the way down from like 45 to 40, and then by the time they're at that 5, we're just like, oh, is that heavy for you, wimp, and stuff like that. Like we'd say that to them, they would get, again, you would have to run as soon as they're done with that last rep on the 5 because they'd be chasing after you. But like, yeah, it is amazing how like with conditioning and with training you can make even the lightest weight just feel like it weighs 10 times as much as it does. So that's, again, and that's also a mind thing too, where yeah, you can do that, and it's great. And I mean, I would love to have you on a year from now to give us an update on what you've been up to. And I mean, you were such a great guest. Where would you like to be at a year from today in your bodybuilding or just in your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved?
Okay, if it was a perfect world, I would love to be on the Olympia stage. I think I got more than a year for that one. But also, really with business, I would really like to have coaches and have my company built in a year. So I'm on my way, but I would like to be a little more comfortable. So I'll say that. Yeah.
And honestly, when I do have you on, I wish you that all that's. I'll check in on with you on that, and we'll see if you got down to it. But I wish you nothing but the best of success. And lastly, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Oh man, too many. Okay, I guess my coach, Cornelius Parkin, love him. I have not been in close contact enough, so I just want to say that if you do not follow that person, follow him because he is so full of knowledge, it's insane. Yeah, and I'll just end there. And all my clients that have just been working their tails off, they know who they are. I won't mention them all by name, but thank you.
We don't have that. Yeah, I was gonna say we don't. We have like an hour and a half left. Everyone, we don't have that. No, I'm just kidding. But so, and I mean, honestly, Aubrey, it was so great to have you on and talk about your journey and just get to know you a little bit better. And I mean, I honestly wish you nothing but the best. And I appreciate what you're doing. And yeah, like I said, I just love having people on to share their stories. Like I said when I messaged you, and just sharing that. It's an inspiration for me just as much as it is for any of the listeners listening here. But I cannot thank you enough, and I
Thank you.
wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you. And it meant so much to come on here. So thank you for inviting me. And definitely hold me accountable in a year.
Well, and if you're ever feeling really body dysmorphic, just send me a photo and say, "Do I look like I'm in shape?" And I'll just be like, I'll just message you back, "You're an idiot," and that's just that's just how I'll respond to that. Basically, I've had some guests do that, and I'm just like, okay, look in the mirror, and if you don't see that, I can't. And I always just play around with them, but yeah,
Yeah, I love that.
I love being help, and I love helping promote this because yeah, it is so underrepresented. I think especially, but again, everyone, go and give Aubrey a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.